Good morning. My name is Eli Howes. Can you please tell me your full name?
Yes, my name is Emma Martinez Hayes.
And what should I call you?
Just Emma's fine.
Okay, Emma, in this first part, I'd like to ask you some questions about yourself. Let's talk about what you do. Do you work or are you a student?
I work. I am an entrepreneur, so I have an online language academy and I create content for that language academy. I also teach languages. I teach English and Spanish, so I have a few different job positions. But yes, I work. And of course, part of being an entrepreneur is learning. So I have to study a lot as well.
How many hours a week do you study for, roughly?
I would say it depends on the week. If I have more work, if I have a lot of work, then I'll probably study maybe 4 to 5 hours, 1 hour a day. I will dedicate to reading or watching videos or podcasts about how I can improve in my job. But my main focus is work.
Do you think you will continue this work for a long time?
Yes, I believe I'll continue this work because I'm trying to create something that can sustain myself and my family in the future. So I hope that I will be doing this for a long time, and that's why I'm studying and working in order to make sure that this business and yes, everything that I'm creating can last a long time.
Let's move on. Let's talk about teachers. Do you remember your teachers from primary school?
I remember a few. I remember a few of them, not all of them, but I did have a few teachers that were very special to me.
Did you have a favorite teacher?
I did have a favorite teacher. She was my kindergarten teacher.
Right.
Yes.
And did you want to be a teacher when you were younger?
I thought about being a teacher, and I think that's because I'm the oldest of five siblings. So I had just from a very young age, I had the role of like the oldest, the teacher, the leader. So I think that conditioned me being a teacher now. So yes, I wanted to be a teacher, and I actually used to play teacher and student with my brothers and sisters. So I was the teacher and they were students.
What kind of teachers do you prefer to have?
I think the best teachers are empathetic, so they listen to students and are very understanding with students and always give students space to speak, especially if we're talking about language learning. I think that my preferred way of learning and teaching languages is through practice instead of lecturing students. So I never want to just lecture my students.
Well, let's talk about languages. What languages do you speak?
I speak English, Spanish, and Portuguese, and I'm learning French.
All right. And have you ever learned any foreign languages in school?
Technically Spanish, but the US system is not the best for foreign languages. So they don't put much weight on learning languages, unfortunately. Here in Spain, there's more weight. So, kids from a very young age have to learn they have to learn English and French. And in the US, we don't have that.
Do you think it's difficult to learn a new language?
I think it's difficult to learn a new language, and I think it's more difficult for some people than others. Some people just have a natural skill when it comes to speaking and learning languages
Hmm.
and acquiring languages. And I think you just have to know what your learning style is and what your strengths are as a learner, as a student. But in general, I do think that languages are hard to learn because they're very complex and there are so many different accents. So, you if you're learning British English, you're going to hear a lot of different phrases that don't exist in the US.
Hmm. Why do you think there are some people, I guess, like yourself, that enjoy learning lots and lots of languages?
Yeah, I think for me, it's a challenge. It's a challenge to make your brain, rewire your brain to think a different way and have contact with different experiences and different perspectives. And I think that people who know more than one language can connect with more people from all over the world just for the fact that they can speak with different people. And you can always make other people feel more comfortable when you speak their language.
Okay, we're going to move on to part two. And in this part, I'm going to give you a topic and I'd like you to talk about it for 1 to 2 minutes. Before you talk, you'll have 1 minute to think about what you're going to say, and you can make some notes if you wish. Do you understand?
Yes.
Okay, your 1 minute starts now. Looks like you might be ready to go.
Yeah, I am.
Okay.
So,
Oh, all right. I'll just introduce you.
okay.
All right. Remember, you have 1 to 2 minutes for this, so don't worry if I stop you. I'll tell you when the time is up. Can you start speaking now, please?
Yes. So the picture that I want to describe that makes me happy is a picture of my two dogs, Bruno and Joel, and we're by a lake here in Seville. And this is our nightly walk. So this is where we go on a walk every night. And in the picture, I'm holding a ball, and both of them are fixated with their eyes on the ball because they're obsessed and they love playing with balls. So this picture makes me happy because I know how happy it makes them to go to this park that I take them to every night. They love chasing after the ball, and after a long day of work, it clears my mind to go on walks with them. And even if a lot of times I don't want to go outside because I'm tired, it's my responsibility to take them out. So every time I take them out, I just feel calm and relaxed. And when I come back from our walks, I always just am able to have my dinner and go to bed with a clear mind. And I just love watching them run and play. And they always bring me a lot of happiness just to see how free they are and how happy and how much love they receive. Because both of them are rescue dogs. So they were abandoned here in Seville, and me and my partner found them on the street and rescued them. So just thinking of how we got them and how happy they are now makes me happy as a dog mom.
Hmm.
So yes.
And have you shown this photo to other people?
Yes, so I took this picture without my partner. So I showed him this picture when I got home, and I sent the picture to my mom as well.
Okay, so we've been talking about a photo that makes you happy, and I'd like to discuss with you one or two more general questions related to this. Let's consider, first of all, the emotions that can be brought up from photographs. So you mentioned how this photo of your dogs made you feel incredibly happy. Why is it that photos can conjure up such powerful emotions in us?
I think because we can, well, if we took the photo, we can go back to that place, that moment when the photo was taken, and we can understand the emotion or remember the emotion that we had in that moment. And if it's a photo taken by someone else, we can analyze the photo and think about it in how we would feel in that moment or observe the photo, and it might have different effects on us.
Mm. And what kind of special events in somebody's life do you think it's important to have photos of?
I would say weddings,
Yeah.
definitely. Weddings, maybe birthdays,
Mm.
birthdays, especially like maybe 10 years, 15 years old, 20 years old, just kind of like the markers.
Hmm.
What else? Graduations, definitely.
Yeah. Why is it important to take photos of these events?
So that we can have a memory forever and
Mm.
share with our future generations,
Mm.
with our kids, with our grandkids, and to reflect on what our life was like when we were
Mm.
younger in that point in our life.
So we used to take a lot of photos with film, and now I guess most photos are digital. Do you think that's changed the way that we take photos and the way that we store these memories?
Yeah, I think that people probably take a lot more pictures now than ever, and people probably take a lot more maybe kind of useless or mundane pictures like their morning breakfast or their morning coffee or selfies, like I think before probably people took more useful pictures to capture a particular moment or a particular landscape, and now maybe it's a little bit more just not as artistic, I guess.
Yeah, why is that? Why do you think nowadays we take fewer artistic photos, and we take probably in general more photos of ourselves than, like you mentioned, our breakfast?
I think probably because social media has made us a little bit more egocentric
Mm.
and care a lot more about our appearance and how we look to the rest of the world, how we seem. And also because we have more possibility to do it, to take pictures all the time. So, well, we just do it.
Hmm. It's possible, so let's go for it.
Yeah.
Let's move on. Let's talk about creativity more broadly. Do you think creativity is something that can be taught, or is it something that some of us have and some of us have more of it?
I don't know if I would say creativity can be taught. I think creativity can be developed. So I think that if we're talking about school, in the school system, we could put more emphasis on art classes and just not necessarily telling kids how they need to paint or how they need to draw, but giving them ideas and letting them run with those ideas and have a little bit more freedom with their creativity. So I wouldn't say that it should and can be taught. I do think it's true that as I said, with languages, some people just have different talents. So
Mm.
some people have a talent for language. Some people have a talent for art. Some people have a talent for math, some for dance.
Mm.
So sure, some people have more creativity than others, but I think all people can be creative if they're given space to develop
Mm.
creativity.
Do you think it's harder to have that space and to develop creativity when you're older?
I think it is because as we get older, we start developing like thoughts about ourselves. So, for example, if I'm someone who I don't feel like an artistic person, as I get older, I might say, well, I just don't paint. I can't paint. I don't know how. So, those are just boundaries that we put on ourselves. And
Mm.
also, as we get older, we have less time. So, our priorities probably not going to be artistic or creative. It's probably work and family.
Mm.
So I do think with time it's harder to
Mm.
develop creativity.
In terms of the self-talk and the boundary, d- the things that we say to to ourselves, where we say, "Hey, I'm not an artistic person. I'm someone that can't paint." What's a way to combat that behavior?
I think it's really hard because a lot of these thoughts happen when we're not paying attention. But I think the key is when you are paying attention to stop and say, hey, that's not true.
Hmm.
And also probably just working with a psychologist, like working with a therapist, probably to work through those thoughts, those negative thoughts about ourselves. And journaling too could help, having a diary, writing down your thoughts.
Okay, thank you very much. That is the end of the speaking test.
Thank you.
Okay, wonderful speaking test. So nice. Really good. It's funny, I found myself kind of really, especially in part three, stopping to kind of focus on the fact that it was a test and starting to spend more time thinking about what you were saying, which is always a good sign if the examiner kind of loses track of the language and starts paying attention to the content.
Yeah. And I was thinking during the test, this is really difficult because on top of like having to focus on having correct vocabulary and grammar, these are deep questions. Like these are actually philosophical questions.
Yes, particularly in part three, right?
Ah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so how did you feel doing this test?
So I felt very good. I think the
Mm.
questions were interesting. And I know that, during every test, the questions will be different depending on the examiner. But I
Mm.
thought the questions were thought-provoking and they
Yeah.
were they were fun to answer.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
Sometimes they're questions that you've never really considered in your first language, and so to answer in the language that you're learning is particularly difficult.
right.
Now, you mentioned in part one that you are, in fact, a language teacher, you're a content creator, you've got a YouTube channel. I believe you're also a podcast host. Could you tell us a little bit about, all of these endeavors, your entrepreneurial side?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So I do have a YouTube channel, and on my YouTube channel, I share my podcast. And my podcast is called Emma's Language Journal. So this is just a place where I share my tips and motivation to learn languages. And I also talk to other language learners and ask for their experiences. We talk about traveling and life. in living in different cultures, I think a big part of learning languages is that connection with culture. So
Mm.
that's why I live in Spain. I love the Spanish language and I love the culture here.
Mm.
So I tried to share a little bit about travel, language, culture, and help language learners achieve their goal of fluency. And I also have a language academy, and we are a team of 5 teachers. We're all bilingual, we're all certified, and we offer private and group lessons for language learners, for English and Spanish learners.
Right, for English and Spanish learners. So people learning English, people learning Spanish.
Exactly.
So, for example, if somebody were watching this speaking test and thinking, well, I would like to do a test with Emma or one of the other language teachers, is that the kind of thing they could do through your academy?
Definitely.
Mm.
Yeah, definitely. We have teachers with experience in testing. So for sure we can prepare classes about test preparation.
Right. Now, you're a native English speaker. You're also a native Spanish speaker. Am I right?
Yes, kind of.
Okay, tell me a bit about that.
Yeah, it gets a little bit tricky. So I'm Mexican American. My family's from Mexico. I was born in the US. But when I was growing up, I spoke Spanglish in my household. So when I was a
Spanglish.
little
So
Spanglish.
Spanish and English.
Yeah. You'll notice a lot of Mexican people who live in the US speak Spanglish because it's just mixing culture, mixing language. So that's what happened to me. So when I was in elementary school, they put me in ESL class because my last name, Martinez, what my appearance, also because,
Mm.
well, I spoke Spanglish. So I took
Mm.
ESL classes in elementary school, and then I think they realized like, no, actually she speaks English and she understands English. So they took me out of ESL. And what happened is that because I only had contact with Spanish through my family, I just didn't develop a very deep Spanish level. So I had to actually study Spanish in university to become really, really fluent. Like the fluency that I have today is because I actually did have to study.
Mm.
So that's why I say kind of. I have the level that I have today because I've always had contact with Spanish, but it's a little bit tricky, and people who are from different cultures and live in like an English speaking country can understand that like just you lose something from both cultures, right? Like we have this phrase in Spanish that's ni de aquí ni de allá, not from
Mm.
here or from there,
Somewhere in
because
the middle.
yeah, that's just kind of the struggle. That's the mixed person struggle. So I'm sure a lot of your viewers can relate to that.
And so when you started learning Portuguese, that was a totally new language for you then.
Yes, but Portuguese is quite similar to Spanish. Well, Brazilian Portuguese. European Portuguese is very difficult, but Brazilian Portuguese is like Spanish. So because I already studied Spanish, it was quite easy for me to learn Portuguese.
Right, okay. Interesting. Yes. And did you also mention that you're learning French at the moment?
Yeah, I started 2 weeks ago.
Right. So if you're learning a language, I take it French is from scratch, from
Yeah.
elementary level. What's your approach to language work learning now, considering that, you reach such a high level of English, Spanish, Portuguese? Has that kind of played a role and shaped how you're going to learn French?
Definitely, definitely. So I already made a video about like what I'm doing now as a
Mm.
French learner, but first I'm learning the pronunciation and having speaking practice, which I have elementary level, so I can't speak, but I'm taking classes from the beginning. And what I see a lot of students do is from the beginning start studying grammar. And that's kind of boring. And then you lose your motivation and you want to give up. And so that's something that the mistake that I don't want to make this time around. I want to start with speaking and pronunciation, also because I know French pronunciation is very, very difficult. So I know that I need to work on that from the beginning so that I can at least understand people.
Yes, and then from the understanding, you're going to be hearing more vocabulary, and then hopefully, fingers crossed, you'll start producing it.
Yeah, right. Definitely.
Great. Anything else that you would like me to ask you before we continue?
No, I don't. Yeah, I don't think so. Maybe you could ask, like, because we both lived in Spain, so we could
Hmm.
talk a little bit about that.
That sounds like a great idea. So now you're in Spain. I think you said you were in Sevilla or Seville.
Yes.
I was actually living in Spain for a long time in Barcelona. How have you found the transition from going from Seattle to living in Seville in Spain?
I find that Seville is such a comfortable city.
Right.
So it's not a huge city like Barcelona. Barcelona is huge and Madrid is huge. And I'm from the suburbs in the US, so I'm not from like Seattle downtown, you know?
Mm.
So I think that Seville is the perfect size. It's small, you can get everywhere walking or by public transportation. And well, I mean, there's a lot of movement in tourism. That's what I love about life here in general, but it's not overwhelming like
Mm.
Madrid, for example. So I found the transition very comfortable and I love life here.
Do you see yourself living in Spain for a long time then?
Now that's where it gets tricky. I love Spain and I love Seville, but my family's so far away. So that's hard.
I also know that feeling well.
Yeah.
As well as living in Spain, I also lived in China and Ireland, and it's only recently that I've moved back to Scotland where my family are based.
Right.
Yeah, and I
That's
know
some,
it gets even more complicated when there's relationships involved. So you mentioned your partner. I imagine he might not be from Seattle and you might not have moved together. You might have met in Spain, in which case that
yeah.
introduces a whole new level of complexity.
Right, definitely. So we'll see what the future tells, right? We'll see what happens. But for now, I'm happy here in Seville and I can travel freely between the US and Seville because I work online. So that's the beautiful thing of working online as well.
Yes, and a great motivator for you to continue creating all this wonderful content and for building your business, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Great. All right, a big thank you for coming on, sharing your experience, learning languages, and also for showing students such an amazing IELTS test. There's really so much to learn from the test that we've done today.
Yeah. Good luck, guys. And make sure to practice like reading maybe about like not philosophical stuff, but just deeper stuff, to be prepared.
Totally. Great stuff. All right, big thank you.
Thank you. Bye.